Now, the White House and Mexican officials confirmed that yesterday's anti-cartel operation was carried out with the help of U.S. intelligence. So, what is the impact of El Mencho's death for the U.S. and beyond? For more on this, we've now reached Elijah Glantz in London. He is a research fellow for the Organized Crime and Policing team at the Royal United Services Institute. Thank you for making time for us today, Elijah.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let's talk about the significance, the wider significance of this operation that was carried out using U.S. intelligence and what has unfolded since.
Absolutely. The use of American intelligence isn't new. This is perhaps a new phase in what has been a 20-year collaboration between the U.S. and Mexico, as well as the U.S. and other countries, such as Colombia in the past, during various iterations of the war on drugs. However, this comes at a time where there have been, there's been a significant strain on the relationship between Mexico and the United States, namely between President Trump and President Sheinbaum. So this operation certainly comes as an interesting step and a very positive step towards tactical cooperation. But strategically and politically, there's still probably much to pass under the bridge between the two countries.
When we do talk about strategically here and politically, as you touched on there, we know that the U.S. president has said that Mexico must step up action against cartels and drugs. And that is something, a message that he has continued to reiterate. So was this carried out in its fashion, sort of in a response to that message from the U.S. president?
Absolutely. I think it's quite clear that this is something that came as a result of pressure. President Sheinbaum in Mexico has campaigned and been very clear in the past that the kingpin strategy, as it's known, of removing the leaders of cartels is certainly not her preferred strategy for dealing with Mexico's security crisis. So the fact that they have gone after not only any kingpin, the country's arguably most violent kingpin, is certainly an indication that there has been a change in thinking, or at least amid some pressure. Will this continue? It remains to be seen. But there's certainly a lot of pressure that is pushing the Mexican government towards taking more action. Now, the question is, will this action result in better outcomes in terms of less violence and less drugs, both in Mexico and the United States? Well, tactically, it was a success, but strategically, I think it's far too early to draw from conclusions. And history tells us we might not see the effects we might like to see.
So to that end then, because it is so early on following this operation being carried out, I am wondering what you anticipate could potentially happen when we're talking about the aftermath of this. We know the cartel responded to El Mencho's death with violence. I'm wondering how long that could carry on for, or how deeply it might penetrate to other parts of the country as well.
Absolutely. I think anything we've seen in the last 24 to 48 hours should not be seen as the start and end. Calls by the government to say that things have perhaps improved won't necessarily reflect the fact that things can get a lot worse before they get better. Put simply, the cartel is currently faced, specifically the CGNG, is faced with a bit of a three-pronged dilemma. Internally, they have to stave off internal groups and sub-factions who would want to spring free and take this chance to do their own operations now that the leader has died. They will have to stave off any kind of encroachment on territory or operations that rival cartels might want to seize upon, but they'll also have to negotiate, in a sense, through violence, most likely, with the government to try to reestablish the détente, the unspoken truce that they had established with the government of not encroaching and not targeting their leaders. So they have three fronts to navigate in terms of stabilizing themselves and ensuring that they can complete and continue their dominance of the drug trade and all the other trades that they currently control. Now, how do they regulate these means? Well, the CGNJ and El Mencho in particular are famous for using violence to these ends. So whether it be determining to try to maintain control over existing corridors or fighting and reinstalling this détente with the government, we should expect more violence as a means to achieve that.
So if that is what may be expected following the death of El Mencho, I'm wondering, because earlier on this year, we heard the U.S. president threaten or suggest that he wanted to send troops into Mexico in order to take control of the security situation. We know that El Mencho was at the very top when it talks about U.S. targets within that country. So what further impact could this have politically in terms of the U.S. threat to enter Mexico?
I think there's two sides to this. So I believe Mexico, the Mexican authorities, and specifically President Sheinbaum, have likely bought themselves a bit of time say the United States had provided intelligence and the Mexican authorities hadn't acted on it, there would perhaps be a greater impetus for President Trump and U.S. authorities to act unilaterally. This may buy them some time and goodwill to prevent that. That said, President Sheinbaum and the Mexican government are in an incredibly difficult position. On the one hand, their actions that they know, and this is why they haven't pursued this policy in the past, is likely to drive up violence in the near term. On the other hand, if they don't take action, they're likely to face a stiffer and a continuing deteriorating relationship with their northern neighbor.
Elijah, I want to thank you so much for this insight and your analysis on this. We appreciate your time.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me.
That is Elijah Glantz. He is a research fellow for the Organized Crime and Policing team at the Royal United Services Institute in London. Thank you.